What would you do if a single act of kindness could unravel the mystery of your entire life? In the heart of Chicago's bustling downtown, where skyscrapers cast long shadows over cracked sidewalks, 16-year-old Eli scraped by. His days were a blur of odd jobs delivering newspapers, washing dishes, anything to keep the lights on in the tiny apartment he shared with his foster mom, Clara. She'd raised him since he was a baby, left on her doorstep with nothing but a blanket and a note that read, "Take care of him." Eli never knew his parents, but he carried a quiet ache, a question that gnawed at him in the still of the night. Why didn't they want me? One chilly evening, as snow dusted the streets, Eli spotted an older man struggling with a torn grocery bag outside a high-end supermarket. The man's tailored coat and polished shoes screamed wealth, but his face was etched with frustration as apples and canned goods spilled onto the pavement. Without a second thought, Eli jogged over, his sneakers splashing through slush. "Hey, let me help you with that," he said, kneeling to gather the scattered items. The man, his silver hair catching the streetlight, muttered a gruff, "Thanks, kid," but his eyes barely met Eli's. They worked in silence, Eli's hands quick and careful, until every item was tucked into a new bag the store clerk handed over. "You didn't have to do that," the man said, finally looking at Eli. His voice was low, almost reluctant, but there was something in his gaze, something that made Eli's chest tighten, though he couldn't place why. "It's no trouble," Eli replied, shrugging. "I know what it's like to need a hand." The man handed him a crumpled 20, which Eli tried to refuse, but the man insisted. "Buy yourself something warm," he said, then turned and disappeared into a sleek black car waiting at the curb. Eli thought that was the end of it. But the next day, while delivering papers, he saw the man again, this time outside a towering glass office building. The man was arguing with a woman in a sharp blazer, someone Eli later learned was his assistant, Marla. She was fierce, her words cutting through the air. "You can't keep avoiding this, Richard. You owe it to him to face the truth." Eli, curious but cautious, kept his distance, pretending to adjust his bike. Marla's eyes flicked toward him, and she froze, her expression softening in a way that made Eli uneasy. She approached, her heels clicking on the pavement. "You're Eli, aren't you?" she asked, her voice suddenly gentle. He nodded, confused. "How do you know my name?" Marla hesitated, glancing back at the man. Richard Ho was now watching them, his face pale. "I've seen your picture," she said quietly. "Clara sends me updates sometimes." Eli's heart pounded. Clara? His foster mom? How did this stranger know her? Marla's next words hit like a thunderbolt. "Richard, he's your father." The world tilted. Eli's knees buckled, and he grabbed his bike for support. Richard, the billionaire in the fancy coat, the man he'd helped with groceries, was his father? The one who'd left him on a doorstep 16 years ago? Richard stepped forward, his hands raised as if to calm a startled animal. "Eli, I didn't know how to tell you," he said, his voice breaking. "I was young, scared. I thought you'd be better off without me." Eli's emotions churned anger, betrayal, but also a desperate need to understand. "Better off," he spat. "I grew up with nothing. Clara worked 3 jobs to keep me fed." Richard's eyes glistened, but Eli didn't care. He turned to leave, but Marla's voice stopped him. "He's been looking for you," she said. "For years. He didn't know where you were until Clara reached out last month." That was the twist Eli hadn't seen coming. Clara had known. She'd kept this secret, protecting him from a truth she wasn't sure he was ready for. Eli's anger softened, replaced by a tangle of hurt and hope. Over the next weeks, he met with Richard, their conversations awkward but earnest. Richard shared stories of his own childhood, his mistakes, his regret. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he was trying. Eli began to see the man behind the money, the one who'd been too broken to be a father but was now reaching out, hoping for a second chance. One evening, as they sat in a quiet diner, Richard slid a small photo across the table. It was Eli as a baby, wrapped in that same blanket from the doorstep. "I kept it," Richard whispered. "I never stopped loving you." Eli's throat tightened. He didn't forgive easily, but he felt something shift, a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Kindness had brought them together, a simple act on a snowy street. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. Eli didn't know if he'd ever call Richard Dad, but he was willing to try. Sometimes, the smallest gestures, helping with groceries, Offering a hand could change everything. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Yindi.